In the early 20th century, an island on the edge of Europe bore witness to a revolt that would send echoes across the continent. The year was 1916. Europe was 2 years into the bloodiest war the continent had ever seen. Amidst this backdrop, Ireland, a country long subjugated by colonial rule, found itself at boiling point. Anger and unrest were fueled by British postponement of Home Rule, a limited form of self-governance that had been promised but was derailed by the war. To further aggravate matters, Britain insisted that this autonomy could only be granted if military conscription was extended to Ireland. The connection between conscription and Home Rule deeply incensed various factions within the Irish nationalist movement. For members of the Irish Republican Brotherhood and other more radical groups, the British government's unwillingness to grant Home Rule was the last straw. They felt that only an armed insurrection would be strong enough to sever ties with Britain and assert Ireland's right to self-determination. This is the story of the Easter Rising, a week-long standoff that set the stage for Ireland's path to independence. By this time, the United Kingdom had long held sway over Ireland. British rule had led to famines, forced Anglicanization, and a suppressed culture. Irish nationalism had been brewing for years, and many organisations had tried to challenge British rule. The Home Rule movement had sought to do this through parliamentary means. However, many more radical groups believed Britain would only be driven out by means of force. A believer in this sentiment was a teacher and a poet by the name of Padraig Pearse. A sworn member of the secretive Irish Republican Brotherhood, Pearse was co-opted onto the IRB's Supreme Council. The outbreak of war had led to the Council seriously considering the viability of an uprising. Believing England's difficulty is Ireland's opportunity. In order to get the weapons and ammunition necessary for a successful insurrection, an Irish envoy was dispatched to Germany. A deal was struck in early April 1916, whereby Germany would provide 20,000 Mosin-Nagant rifles, 10 machine guns, and accompanying ammunition. Departing from Lübeck in Germany, the cargo was headed for Queenstown in County Cork. Sir Roger Casement, who had brokered the arms deal, believed the supplies to be insufficient. He urgently tried to persuade IRB leadership to call off the rising. British intelligence had intercepted German communications coming from Washington, and it suspected there was going to be an attempt to land arms in Ireland, although they were not aware of the precise location. 3 days prior to the planned start of the rising, the ship designated for arms smuggling was seized. Casement was arrested as well. Despite this, Pearse insisted that the rising should proceed as scheduled. Deeply influenced by Celtic lore and religious philosophy, Pearse was entranced by the concept of a blood sacrifice. He saw himself as a martyr in waiting, preparing to lay down his life for the Irish cause. On the morning of Monday, April 24th, 1916, the Easter Rising erupted into action. Rebel forces swiftly descended on key locations throughout central Dublin, each group having a critical role to play. The strategy was clear: isolate the heart of the city, fortify it against inevitable British counterattacks. With a coordinated effort, they secured buildings, barricaded windows and doors, and established first aid stations. On the streets, barricades sprang up, designed to stymie British military movement. Among these seized sites was the General Post Office, which became the revolution's symbolic heart. Here, Padraig Pearse stood on the steps and read aloud the proclamation of the Irish Republic. With stirring words, he declared the establishment of the provisional government, chiefly comprised by IRB members. Yet, the public reaction was not what the rebels had anticipated. Far from rallying to their cause, the citizens of Dublin largely held back. This left a mere 1,200 rebels in the daunting standoff against the full might of the British Empire. In the immediate aftermath of the uprising, British authorities acted swiftly, declaring martial law across all of Ireland. The revolt took them by surprise. They had been under the impression that the failed arms shipment from Germany and Roger Casement's arrest had effectively derailed any plans of an insurrection. By the afternoon of the very next day, Brigadier General William Lowe had marshalled a formidable force of 5,000 troops in Dublin. The rebels, outnumbered and outgunned, found themselves in a precarious position. Lowe's strategy was as surgical as it was merciless: isolate the rebels and force their surrender with overwhelming firepower. British artillery units took their positions. laying siege to the rebel strongholds. To add fuel to the fire, the Helga, a British gunboat, navigated up the River Liffey, its cannons roaring as they pounded rebel-held buildings. The firepower from the Helga broke the rebels' resistance, pushing them into a desperate retreat. Hindered by their failure to seize either of Dublin's main railway stations or its ports, the rebels couldn't stop British reinforcements from pouring in. By Thursday, the noose was tightening around the rebels, the British forces zeroing in on the General Post Office. On Friday, under relentless artillery fire, the GPO's roof erupted into flames, forcing the rebels to abandon their stronghold. By Saturday, Pearse and the IRB Military Council found themselves cornered, setting up a makeshift headquarters in Moore Street. Surrounded, and with no other escape routes, they faced a grim reality. With lives hanging in the balance, and no options left, Pearse accepted Lowe's offer for an unconditional surrender. The Easter Rising's immediate aftermath was one of destruction and loss. Dublin lay in ruins, and 485 individuals had lost their lives. Public opinion at the time was fractured. Far from being seen as heroes, the rebels faced widespread skepticism, if not outright opposition. Many Dubliners had families serving in the British Army and saw the insurrection as a betrayal of their kin. Others were disturbed by the violence employed by the rebels, while some used the chaos as an opportunity to loot shops. Still, others observed the conflict with a blend of detachment and curiosity. However, the tenor of public opinion began to shift in the wake of British response to the rebellion. The ensuing military occupation of Dublin and the internment of over 1,400 Republicans, many of whom had little or nothing to do with the Rising, stoked resentment among the Irish population. The tipping point came with the execution of 16 of the Rising's leaders, including the signatories of the proclamation. Notably absent from this grim tally was Eamon de Valera, commandant of the 3rd Battalion, who escaped execution partly due to his American birth. De Valera would later become a prominent figure in Irish politics, ultimately serving as President of Ireland. In a haunting fulfillment of Pearse's concept of a blood sacrifice, the very men who were vilified in the immediate aftermath were soon recast as heroes and martyrs for the Irish cause. This change in public opinion would prove pivotal. The Easter Rising, although a military failure, became a symbolic victory that galvanized the Irish populace. It served as a catalyst for subsequent revolutionary movements, eventually leading to the establishment of the Irish Free State. What had begun as a week-long skirmish in Dublin evolved into a seismic shift that changed the course of Irish history.